This is 1020s, a podcast from 1020 Marketing. 10 episodes, 20 minutes each. Because meaningful marketing gets to the point.
I'm Mark, and welcome to 1020s. How you doing, Bev?
Hi. I'm good.
You're good? I'm good.
How are
We're
you?
both good.
You seem good.
I feel good. I feel really
Excellent.
good, yes.
That makes me happy. Who are we chatting with today?
Yeah, so today's guest is a very special person from early on in my career. His name is Jake Volt, and he was my second ever creative director, but truly he was my first mentor. Jake and his partner, Sarah Roncarelli, hired me in the fall of 1998, so we're going back some time, to work as a copywriter at Acme Advertising, a small up-and-coming shop. But the second I walked into their office, I just knew I was home. I don't know if I can describe it any other way. At the time, that agency, Acme, was putting out creative that was as good, if not better, than the shops I was familiar with in Toronto. Winning awards, and they were like really getting noticed outside of the market. And a lot of that was due to Jake's talent as a writer, but also how he guided the team along with Sarah. Later in his career, Jake started focusing on teaching, becoming a professor of advertising at Algonquin College in Ottawa. Since then, he's been reaching younger, talented students and guiding them into the world of advertising. So I invited him to be on the show so that we can understand his experiences in the advertising industry. And more importantly, and what I'd really like to focus on a little bit more today, is his role as a teacher. Without further delay, why don't we bring in my old friend, Jake Volt.
Hello.
Good morning, Mr. Volt. How are you?
Very good. How are you?
So nice to see you.
Thank you. Nice to see you too.
You have a fantastic name.
Oh, thank
Jake
you.
Volt. Kind of sounds like a fake name.
It is absolutely a fake name. You want to hear the name I was born with?
Yes.
Avram Valdemar. Yeah, no,
Yes.
Volt is real. Volt, my father changed it when I was about 1 or 2, so that was my name, but I grew up as Avram Volt. And so when I came to Ottawa, and I know I'm just going to meet all new people, I'm going to have to introduce myself. It's hard to introduce yourself as Avram. The conversation always goes, "Hi, I'm Avram." What? Avram. What?
Yeah.
Avrom. Oh, what's that? That's Jewish. Hey, you're Jewish? Do you know Shlomo Greenberg? That's always a
I
conversation.
do. I know
I
Shlomo.
know Shlomo.
You
Yeah.
both, everyone knows Shlomo. Anyway, so I didn't want that, and so when I moved to Ottawa, I tried out different names, and I was working at J. Walter Thompson at the time, and in our building was Q107, the radio station.
Okay.
And so we'd see the DJs, walking around in the lobby. And one morning I saw Jake the Snake. I forget his last name, but he was Jake the Snake. And I said, hey, I should try Jake. And so I went back up into my office and I told people, call me Jake. And they did, and I liked it. So, but Jake
It's
is,
not easy.
yeah, Jake is still not officially on any of my official documentation.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to out you. I just
It's okay.
thought it sounds so lovely.
Yeah,
I
it
like
is.
I
Yeah.
like your old name too, but
Well, thanks. Yeah.
thank you. That was a really interesting
Yeah.
story.
And I think it's a great ad name. It sounds like
It
an ad name.
is.
Oh,
That's why.
totally
That's part
ad
of
man.
it.
Totally, like it's straight out of Mad Men.
Perfect.
So Jake, why don't we start here at the beginning? Talk about your early career, how you got into advertising, and becoming the copywriter that you were up to the time when we met in the late 90s.
Okay, I'll start really, really early because I do like the story. So I was, as a kid, I just liked advertising. I liked Bewitched because it was about advertising. I knew all the jingles. I knew all the commercials. I could repeat them. I didn't know it was a thing you could do, though. A kid doesn't know that someone does that. And in grade 11 in my high school, they had this deal where they would send you to any kind of workplace. And so some of my friends went to cop shops, or one friend went to the supermarket. He wanted to know how a supermarket worked. And so I asked to be sent to an ad agency. I knew that there were such things as ad agencies.
This was in Toronto, Jake?
In Toronto, in
Okay.
secondary school. And they sent me to Vickers and Benson, which was like one of the greatest Canadian agencies ever. I think they're no longer around. And I got there. I think it was a 2-week thing. I had to go, and I remember dressed up and I had a jacket. And when I got there, of course, nobody was expecting me, which I now know to be typical of advertising agents. So I showed up. Hi, I'm Avram Volt. What? And anyway, so I think the office manager came and didn't know what to do. So they would just for a few days take me from department to department. And the first department they gave me was media. And they gave me an actual literal one of those adding machines, because that's what you did. And they told me to add up all these numbers from all these pages. And I did a horrible, horrible job. probably purposefully, and also because my brain doesn't work that way. Anyways, another department, finally they took me to the creative department. And they were a very good creative shop, Vickers and Benson. And the creative department had its own floor and its own doors. And they brought me up, and I remember the doors open, and the smell, the markers, which is what the art directors used to use, and the waxes that they used to put to hear layouts, and glue, and music. Rock and roll was playing, and everybody looked like a hippie. I was like, that was it. That was it.
What year was this around, Jake?
I would have been 16, so
The early 70s. Early 70s.
early 70s. And they sat me with a copywriter, and that was it. I was smitten. I said, I'm going to be a copywriter. I didn't know that was a thing, but I'm going to do it. They let me write an ad. I don't know if you remember the product Resdan, which was for dandruff. Anyways, these guys did that. And so my copywriter mentor, he gave me a little storyboard thing. And he said, fill it out. Just write a commercial for Resdan. And so I spent like a day doing that. They didn't run it, but, they seemed to like it and were impressed by it. And that was it. From that moment on, I said, I have to become a copywriter. I had no plan B. There was nothing else I thought I could or should do. So then I had to make it happen.
I love
love
story.
that.
So
Yeah.
where did you work, and what led to, the creation of Acme Advertising in Ottawa?
So I started in Toronto, and I worked for Safford Craven Friedman, which was a big retail agency. When I started, it was 100 people. When I finished, it was 300. Then I went to J. Walter Thompson, which everybody knows, of course. And then I moved to Ottawa, and just for a lifestyle change. Toronto was getting too frantic and too scary, and traffic was nuts. And my wife's from the Ottawa Valley, so we came to visit friends in Ottawa. We said, what a beautiful city. And she was a nurse. I was a copywriter. We said, if we can both get jobs in Ottawa, we will move. And we both got jobs. So I started a company called Media Plus, stayed there about 5 years. It was nice. It was much smaller than, of course, J. Walter Thompson. It took me a while to get used to the way things were done, and I had to be my own producer for the first time, which I didn't like, but I got kind of good at it. Then I went to a company called McGill, Wallace Curley McGill, but I think it was McGill, and that's when I met Sarah Roncarelli, who came from Toronto. She came from Jeffrey Roach's company. She was an art director.
Yeah. That was in the 90s, the agency to be at.
Yeah, and so she'd been there, and she wanted to move to Ottawa for a love interest. And I interviewed her at Media Plus, and I said to Don, who is the creative director owner, I said, you should hire her. She's fantastic. And he said, oh, no, we haven't got the budget. And then she and I started kind of figuring out how can we work together. So we went to a competitor called Wallace Kearney McGill, and worked there about 6 months. Well, actually, we worked there a month. And then, so I'm not really a risk taker. I had quit a full-time job for a half-time job just to work with Sarah. That's how much I was smitten by her personally, and not a love interest, but personally, and her brain, her advertising brain. And then I think 2 or 3 weeks after I was there, McGill went under. And so now this non-risk taker with a baby at home, 6-month-old baby, has no job. So McGill went under for a while and then reemerged, which happens all the time. And he said, hey, I need a team. What about you and Sarah as a creative team? We said, sure. There we met Robert Hawking, and the three of us were basically the main team. I was the writer, art director. He was the account guy. And we were doing that for a while. And it was a small company, and, it didn't feel secure, and we weren't getting what we wanted, creative people. And so we just kind of talked about starting our own company, which I did not want to do. Because again, I'm not an entrepreneur, but I did it because they said, well, we're doing it, Jake. So if you don't come with us, I don't know what you're going to do. And that was the beginning of Acme. And it was the typical story, the three of us in Robert's apartment working at the kitchen table.
Yeah.
No clients.
I gotta say, I'm fascinated by every aspect of the evolution of this industry, but something that I kind of love that maybe I didn't really articulate until now or notice until now is how the names have changed of the agencies. They were named so much like law firms, and now they're like, what's the wacky word combination that we can put together?
Yeah,
I tell this story a lot because I think it's a good lesson. I remember at the time that I met you, it was the fall of 1998. I just accepted a job in Toronto to work with some guy in the communications department of some company somewhere. And that job was offering me $40,000 at the time. Like I was 26, 27 years old. I was like, okay, that's not so bad. I had a couple of weeks off before I was starting that job, and I came into Montreal. In the meanwhile, I got a call from you guys saying, "Hey, we saw your book. We want you to come in for an interview." So I said, "What do I have to lose?" I come in for the interview, and the second I walked through the doors on Bank Street, I knew I was in my element, right? I just knew it from the minute I saw the setup, the posters on the wall, all of it. And then I sat with you and Sarah in the boardroom at the time, and we had the interview. And I remember very specifically Sarah asking me a question, and the question was, how do you feel about working late? And without hesitation, I looked at you guys and said, do people still ask that question in interviews? And you guys both looked at each other like, who the hell is this guy? Right? And I knew I had you that minute. And you guys walked out of the office, you came back, you offered me $26,500. And 2 days later, I took the job. And 2 weeks later, I was in Ottawa. And it was always the best move of my career. But Jake, I want to focus a little bit on your teaching career, because, you told me the other day, it's been 16 years already. I didn't realize it was that long. And I want to talk about
13, I believe.
Oh, 13. Okay.
Remember, I'm the numbers guy.
Better than I wasn't counting from the beginning. So I always looked at you as my first real mentor. I always looked at you as somebody who taught me a lot about the business, a lot about writing, the importance of sitting down and trying and getting it right. And I remember once you gave me crap because even though an ad a campaign that we had written won awards, you were still not happy that I never went back and fixed the copy. And it was a lesson I always kept with me. Then you become a teacher, which I felt at the time hearing that news, perfect for you, like honestly, a perfect role for you. So what was it like making that transition from industry veteran to teacher?
So it was the best segue of my life. I was coming up 35 years of copywriting, creative directing. I was still doing it, still winning awards. I could still write it, but I was tired of it. And my enthusiasm for sure was waning. Throughout the years in Ottawa, I've always been doing things with Algonquin, either having the students come to see me at the agency or doing their portfolio review. And I was finding that when they were coming to see me, I really enjoyed it. I was talking to them, they were listening to me. And then the students would leave and I was sad. I was like, oh, anyways, but I didn't think I'd get a full-time job doing it. I thought I'll just part-time teach whenever I get a chance. One year I went to portfolio review. My current colleague, Greg, who knew me from the industry, he was a Media Plus guy. He said, hey, Jake, how you doing? Good to see you. You know, a full-time job's coming up that has your name on it. We need a writer, teacher. And he expected me to thank him and say, well, no, I've got this gig going on. But I went, and he went, and he didn't think I would say that. So I went through this process. Anyways, so in advertising, as you know, you got your book, your work is out there. Someone says, hey, come and meet me. You come and meet them. They like you. They shake. They say, can you start in 2 weeks? And you go, yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
This is my first time with a huge organization. I had to put together a resume. Well, I hadn't had a resume because I was Jake Bolt. People knew my work. I had to do a guest teach, and they wouldn't get back to me for months. It's just as, and there are other parts of the process. Anyways, as the process was going on, I wanted it more and more. I was getting really hungry for it. I thought, oh, if I don't get it, how can I go back to being in the biz? The more I thought I might get the teaching job, the more I wanted it. Luckily, it came, and I got it. And so my biggest change was I had to watch what I said. Because, in advertising, you say what you like, and there's F-bombs all over the place, and sometimes we're not extremely politically correct. But now I'm in front of students, young students. And so I had to catch myself from not just saying these crazy, wacky things that came off the top of my head. That was the biggest challenge in the first year. The
filter had to be reapplied.
Yeah, the filter hadn't been developed, and I was developing it as I was going on.
So how do you reconcile your role as a mentor with, this up and coming generation, and how was it different? Like, what's the differences you see when you first started teaching, over a decade ago to now as you're winding down, like the difference in what students are after, what they want, how you teach, things like that?
Biggest difference I found is when I started, many of the students knew about the industry. They knew what was happening locally, and they knew, who DDB was and J. Walter Thompson was and who White and Kennedy was. They had a sense of that. The students today, I'm shocked by how little they know about the industry, and I'm shocked by how little curiosity they have. I certainly
so interesting.
We have a course in first year called Advertising 1 where they're taught a bit of the history. I see them in second semester, and I throw as much as I can because I think I'm a bit of an advertising historian just because I've lived through it and I've loved these great agencies and people, and they just don't seem that interested. So that's a little
really
sad to me.
I wonder if that applies like across the board, like generationally, that attitude of like a lack of curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting point, Jake, also, because Bev and I both are graduates of the Humber College copywriting program, years apart, whatever. And I don't know, Bev, if it was the same for you, but when we went through that program, a big part of that program was, understanding the history and why the craft of copywriting, how it's evolved and what makes a good headline and who was the father of advertising and all that sort of thing. And that to me was so important as a building block foundationally in my career.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And I did the program 15 years after you because it was a second career for me, but it was still it was on the cusp of, I think, a really big change in this world. It was kind of in between. We still had books, physical books, but people were doing, online portfolios, but some had this and some had that. It was like really like a period of flux and change. And everybody in my program had still this, there's like a hunger and an enthusiasm and a sense of curiosity that was there. And it was like this world that you wanted to be a part of, and you want to learn as much about it as possible. So that's really interesting for me to hear. So
here's my theory. I think now, and I'm noticing this not just in advertising, but just in other things with young people, because I'm around young people, because everyone's being fed the content that they want, because the algorithms know you and give you more and more of that. There's less interest in what's out there. And you can find anything you want, but it's not being fed to them. And therefore, it doesn't really exist.
So, Jake, we got to wind down a little bit. But what final words of advice would you give to somebody looking to start a career in advertising in today's world, in today's environment? Or do you even give a shit anymore?
Officially or unofficially?
Valid question.
I still give a shit in the class, and beyond the class, I'm getting less and less interested. I would give the advice I have been giving, and I don't know if it would work, is just follow the greats. We used to have the one shows, and now nobody buys the one shows, but you can. So I keep repeating to the students, at least get ads of the world and campaigns of the world, put it on your desktop, look at it once a week, find out who's doing the good work, emulate them, copy them until you're good enough not to copy them. And the very, very first time I meet my students in first year, my first slide is be curious. I tell them that they should be curious. And
we want to thank you so much for taking the time for us. I have a special place in my heart for you always. You're a special man in my life. I appreciate you, even though we don't always, keep in touch or speak regularly. I wish we did. But thank you. Thank you for carving out the time.
Thanks for having me. Lovely to meet you, Bev.
It's really lovely to meet you.
Nice to see you again, Mark.
All right, we'll see you soon. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. I wish we had longer.
Me too. I wish we had
love
longer.
hearing stories about the evolution of the industry.
He has so many stories, Bev. So
I just
many.
love
I remember. He was a part of my world when everything was coming together for me, right? At that time in the late 90s, I moved to Ottawa. I didn't know a single soul. I was on my own for the first time ever.
When he mentioned that thing about algorithms, that's something I think about often, how there's this sense of entitlement because you're used to everything being catered to you. So I love that he opens his lessons with setting the intention to be curious. I think that 100%. Is one of the most important things, not just in this industry, but in this world.
Yeah, I agree. I
think it's so important to want to look outside of your little bubble.
So we should say goodbye.
Okay.
So thanks for everything. We'll see you next time.
Yep. Likewise.